You live in an age of diagnostics, of acronyms and categories, apps and therapies. You can name your pain, chart it, track it on a screen. There are support groups and TED Talks and chemical solutions. And yet, anxiety still feels like a ghost in the room, a quiet panic behind the eyes, a flutter in the chest that no label can quite soothe. But what if you looked backward instead of forward? What if the key to understanding your mind wasn't in the next breakthrough, but in a forgotten past? In dimly lit chapels and handwritten prayers, in the silence of monasteries and the chaos of plague-ridden cities, the Middle Ages, a time we often dismiss as dark, crude, unthinking. But peel back the stereotypes, and you'll find something far more human. A world not devoid of psychological depth, but saturated with it. They didn't have our words, anxiety and depression, panic disorder, but they felt them. They lived them. They feared them just as deeply. They just spoke a different language. When you read their journals, their letters, even their theology, you find echoes of the same unease you carry. Only they called it melancholia, a heaviness of the soul, or acedia, a strange spiritual fatigue described by monks as a sickening boredom with life itself. Some called it soul sickness, a divine ache with no clear source. Isn't that how it often feels? When nothing is exactly wrong, but nothing feels right either? Back then, anxiety didn't exist in isolation. It was braided into your relationship with God, with sin, with the afterlife. Salvation wasn't just an abstract promise, it was a lifeline, and damnation wasn't a metaphor. It was a real place your soul might land if your thoughts strayed too far. Confession became a form of therapy, but also a breeding ground for shame. Doubt, desire, despair, all potential proof that you were spiritually unwell. Can you imagine living like that? Where every fear might be evidence of your own unworthiness. But religion did more than punish. For many, it also soothed. Rituals gave structure. Prayers gave voice to fears. Saints became symbols of survival. People who had also suffered and somehow found peace. Even if you didn't fully believe, the system gave you something to cling to in the chaos. And there was chaos. The Black Death killed millions. Entire villages vanished. Children watched parents die in the streets. Survivors didn't have psychologists. There were no hotlines, no social media solidarity, only silence, and the sound of church bells tolling again and again. Still, people endured. Some turned to flagellation, whipping themselves to prove their worth. Others ran to monasteries, desperate to escape both plague and sin. Grief lived in their bodies, in dreams, in how they built their homes and buried their dead. Was that not trauma long before the word existed? Meanwhile, medieval medicine tried, in its own strange way, to explain the mind. They spoke of humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. Too much black bile? You were melancholic. The remedy? Maybe a leech, maybe a tincture of herbs, maybe a whispered prayer. It sounds primitive, but don't we still seek balance? Still wonder if food or sleep or sunlight might fix us? Even monks, those silent cloistered men, lived by rhythms that feel oddly familiar today. They practiced routine, stillness, intentional silence, woke with the sun, slept with the stars, prayed not just to speak, but to listen. And though they didn't speak of mindfulness, their lives echoed its cadence. Could it be that in their solitude, they stumbled on something we're still chasing? But not everyone had that sanctuary, especially not women. A woman's pain was suspect. Her sadness, hysteria. Her rebellion, witchcraft. Anxiety, when expressed through a female body, became dangerous. You could be burned for your visions, imprisoned for your sorrow. It wasn't just about health. It was about control. And yet, beyond palaces and parchment, the common folk had their own ways of coping. Music in taverns, shared stories by firelight, superstitions that turned fear into fable. Even crude humor, jokes about death, devils, and drunken priests, became survival tools. Laughter, when the world made no sense. In a way, it still doesn't. But maybe you've forgotten how powerful simple rituals can be. A song, a story, a shared moment of absurdity. For all their superstition, medieval people knew how to endure, not with optimism but with purpose, with faith that suffering meant something, that there was a reason for the ache. They didn't always need to fix the pain, they needed to place it, to name it as part of something bigger. That's something we've lost. Today we chase solutions, fast ones, clean ones, but maybe part of healing is remembering. Remembering that the mind is not just a machine to be optimized, it's a story to be understood. That anxiety is not simply a glitch, but sometimes a message, a signal that something deeper is unsettled. What if you stopped treating it like an enemy? What if you started listening? You see, the past is not just a shadow, it's a mirror, And when you look into it, you might find reflections you didn't expect. People who feared and wept and endured, just like you. Not perfect, not enlightened, but human. And that's what matters. You don't need to romanticize their suffering. You don't need to trade science for superstition. But maybe, just maybe, their silence holds a wisdom we've overlooked. A reminder that mental health isn't just about chemicals or checklists. It's about meaning. It's about connection. It's about how you live with the things you cannot change. And if they, in their world of plague and prayer, could find a way forward, maybe so can you.